There are moments in life when you look back at the people who hurt you the most and wonder, God, why did you let me meet them? The liar, the manipulator, the narcissist who drained your energy, twisted your reality, and made you question your worth. You prayed for love, and instead you found yourself in a storm of control and confusion. But what if that encounter wasn't meant to destroy you? What if it was meant to define you? Because sometimes God allows the narcissist not to break you, but to build you. God allowed that narcissist into your life not as a punishment, but as a mirror. Sometimes the most painful relationships are not meant to destroy you, but to reveal what's hidden deep within you. When you encountered that narcissist, you didn't just meet a person, you met a reflection of your own unhealed wounds, your deepest desires, and the insecurities you never confronted. They didn't just manipulate your emotions, they exposed your need for validation, your fear of abandonment, and your struggle with self-worth. Through them, God revealed the parts of you that were still seeking love in broken places. Many times we pray for growth, for strength, for deeper intimacy with God, but we forget that growth rarely comes through comfort. God often uses people as mirrors to show us where we still need healing. And sometimes the people he uses are the hardest to love. The narcissist enters your life wearing charm like a crown. They say all the right words. They give you the illusion of being seen and cherished. And then slowly they take it away. You start questioning yourself, what did I do wrong? Why am I not enough anymore? But this questioning, as painful as it is, becomes the beginning of awakening. The narcissist's presence magnifies your longing to be chosen. It uncovers how deeply you tied your identity to someone's approval. You start realizing how much of your joy depended on how they treated you. And when they withdraw affection, when they twist your words, when they make you feel invisible, God whispers, "Do you see now why I'm showing you this?" He doesn't reveal it to shame you, but to heal you, because you can't fix what you refuse to see. Through the narcissist's manipulation, God was teaching you discernment. Through their control, he was teaching you freedom. Through their rejection, he was showing you that your value is not determined by someone else's inability to love you. Every lie they told became an opportunity for you to seek truth. Every insult they spoke became an invitation for you to rediscover your worth. Every time they devalued you, heaven was silently building the strength within you to say, no more. It's painful to admit, but without that experience, you may have continued living in patterns of people pleasing, settling for less, or mistaking attention for affection. God knew it would take someone like that, someone sharp enough to cut deep, to expose the roots of your weakness so he could replant you in strength. The narcissist was not sent to break you. They were allowed to show you the cracks in your foundation so that God could rebuild you on truth. Looking back, you'll see how everything they did served a divine purpose. You learned to trust your intuition again. You learned to set boundaries. You learned that love without respect is not love at all. You discovered that your peace is sacred and that no relationship, no matter how intense, is worth losing yourself for. So yes, God allowed that narcissist, but not as a curse. They were a divine mirror reflecting not only your pain, but your potential. Through that mirror, God showed you your resilience, your strength, and your capacity to love yourself the way he always intended. The encounter hurt, but it healed you in ways nothing else could. Because sometimes God has to let you meet the wrong person to help you finally recognize the right reflection, the one he always saw when he looked at you. Pain was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to develop you. Every heartbreak, every betrayal, every manipulation by that narcissist was not random. It was a part of God's divine design to shape your purpose. When you prayed for growth, you didn't know that God would answer with pain. When you asked him to make you stronger, you didn't realize that strength would be born through tears. The narcissist became the tool in God's hand to carve away the parts of you that couldn't go where he was taking you. What they meant for harm, God used as the training ground for your transformation. The relationship that broke you was the classroom where heaven taught you endurance. Every sleepless night, every moment of confusion, every time you questioned your worth, all of it was molding you into a vessel of wisdom. You thought you were losing yourself, but you were actually shedding what no longer served your destiny. The very pain that felt like punishment was preparation. You see, God never wastes pain. He uses it as a divine instrument to refine, strengthen, and elevate you to a place you could not reach through comfort. When that narcissist drained your energy and played with your emotions, you were being trained in discernment. You learned how to recognize manipulation, how to stand firm in your truth, and how to walk away from what no longer aligned with your peace. The relationship forced you to grow spiritually. It pushed you into prayer, into reflection, into dependence on God. Pain has a way of silencing the noise around you so you can finally hear God clearly. In the moments you felt most abandoned was closest. When they made you feel small, God was showing you how big your spirit really was. Pain is not pleasant, but it is purposeful. It burns, but it purifies, just like gold is refined in fire. Your character was being purified through heartbreak. God used the narcissist's cruelty to teach you compassion, their arrogance to teach you humility, their deceit to teach you truth. He turned their manipulation into your motivation. The relationship may have ended in ashes, but it birthed in you a resilience that cannot be faked or borrowed. That is what divine transformation looks like, beauty rising from brokenness. And one day you'll look back and realize that the pain was your teacher. Without it, you wouldn't know your strength. Without it, you wouldn't recognize your worth. Without it, you wouldn't have the authority to speak healing into others. The very thing that almost broke you became the testimony that will set others free. Because when God redeems your pain, He gives it power. He turns wounds into wisdom and tears into truth. So the next time you think about what that narcissist did, remember they were just an instrument in the symphony of your growth. The enemy thought he was destroying you, but he was actually driving you deeper into purpose. Every disappointment became direction. Every rejection became redirection. Every heartbreak became the hammer that shaped your destiny. God doesn't always deliver you from pain. Sometimes He delivers you through it. You didn't just survive the storm. You were transformed by it. The fire that tried to consume you ended up refining you. You came out with a voice that carries authority, a heart that knows empathy, and a spirit that no longer bows to manipulation. Pain was not the end of your story. It was the beginning of your purpose. Because what the narcissist meant to destroy, God used to define you. Your tears were the tools that built your strength, and your suffering became the seed of your destiny. Rejection often feels like the cruelest pain a heart can endure. When that narcissist turned cold, when they ignored your messages, when they made you feel invisible, it felt like a dagger to your soul. You questioned everything you're worth, your beauty, your value, your purpose. But what if that rejection was never meant to break you, but to redirect you? What if God allowed them to walk away because where you were headed, they couldn't follow? Rejection was not your downfall. It was your deliverance in disguise. You see, God hears conversations you can't. He sees intentions you're blind to. While you were pleading for the relationship to work, He was protecting you from battles you didn't even know were coming. Sometimes we mistake God's protection for punishment because it hurts to lose what we prayed for. But the truth is, God saw what you couldn't, the motives, the deception, the manipulation, and in His mercy, He stepped in and said, enough. When the narcissist walked away, it wasn't because you were unworthy. It was because they had completed their purpose in your story. They were a lesson, not a lifetime. It's easy to see rejection as abandonment, but in heaven's perspective, it's alignment. God removed them to make room for something greater. You were never meant to stay bound to someone who couldn't handle the weight of your calling. They wanted to keep you small so they could feel big. They needed to control you to feel secure. But God didn't design you for manipulation. He designed you for freedom. So He allowed the distance, the silence, the disconnection, not because He was ignoring you, but because He was rescuing you. There's a moment when God will let the very thing you begged for slip through your fingers, not because you don't deserve love, but because you deserve better love. The kind that doesn't demand your silence to keep peace, the kind that doesn't make you question your sanity, the kind that honors your spirit instead of draining it. And sometimes, to reach that kind of love, God has to first pull you away from the counterfeit. The narcissist was a counterfeit version of what you thought you needed. They wore the mask of love, but their actions revealed control. And when the mask fell, God made sure you wouldn't fall with it. Rejection hurts, but it's holy. It breaks your attachment to what was never meant for your future. Every unanswered call, every ghosted message, every silent goodbye, those were heaven's ways of closing doors. You were too loyal to shut yourself. You didn't lose anything that was meant to stay. You were being positioned for peace. And though it felt like heartbreak, it was actually a handoff from human rejection to divine redirection. When you finally stop chasing what God has removed, you begin to see the purpose behind it all. The loneliness that followed wasn't punishment, it was preparation. In that silence, you found your voice again. In that emptiness, you discovered your worth. And in that heartbreak, you met God in a deeper way. So when you look back at that season of rejection, see it for what it truly was, divine intervention. God separated you from the narcissist because your destiny couldn't survive their dysfunction. Their absence made room for your healing. Their rejection opened the path to your restoration. What felt like the end was really the turning point, the moment heaven whispered, "You've suffered long enough. It's time to rise." You didn't lose them. You were released from them. And sometimes God has to let you cry your way out of a prison before you can dance your way into purpose. Their rejection was your redirection, and that redirection was the greatest mercy of all. When God allowed you to meet that narcissist, it was never about romance. It was about awakening. The relationship may have started with charm, excitement, and hope, but beneath it all was a divine lesson waiting to unfold. You thought you had found love, but God was using that experience to teach you self-worth, boundaries, and spiritual awareness. Sometimes the most painful encounters are the ones that awaken us from the deepest sleep, the sleep of self-neglect and emotional blindness. The narcissist didn't just enter your life to hurt you. They entered to expose what you could no longer ignore. In the beginning, you were drawn to their confidence, their energy, their attention. They made you feel seen, but only for a moment. Slowly, their admiration turned into control, their affection into manipulation. You began to shrink yourself just to keep their love. You silenced your truth to avoid conflict. You walked on eggshells, mistaking survival for love. But what you didn't realize was that even in that suffering, God was moving. Every time you felt unseen, He was teaching you to see yourself. Every time you felt unloved, He was calling you to experience His love. Every moment of confusion was designed to awaken clarity. You see, the narcissist wasn't sent to fulfill your heart. They were sent to reveal what was missing within it. They showed you how easily you gave away your peace to keep temporary comfort. They made you aware of how deeply you feared being alone. Through their neglect, you learned how much you had neglected yourself. And as painful as that realization was, it became the first step toward transformation, because God cannot heal what we refuse to see. That relationship became your awakening because it forced you to face truth. You began to recognize that love is not supposed to feel like walking through fire every day. You learned that peace isn't found in trying harder to please someone. It's found in letting go of those who abuse your heart. The narcissist exposed your spiritual blindness, the way you confused chaos for passion, control for care, and approval for affection. God used that confusion to teach you discernment. You began to pray differently, not for them to change, but for you to see. There comes a moment when pain becomes your teacher. And that's what happened through that relationship. The heartbreak awakened your voice. You realized that love should never silence who you are. You found courage in your tears, clarity in your heartbreak, and wisdom in your healing. And when you finally walked away, you didn't just leave a person. You left behind an old version of yourself who accepted less than what God intended. This awakening didn't happen overnight. It came through disappointment, tears, and countless prayers. But now you see with different eyes. You can sense manipulation before it reaches your heart. You understand that your peace is priceless and that love should never come at the cost of your identity. The narcissist awakened your spirit to what true love looks like, not the kind that demands control, but the kind that reflects God's heart patient, kind, and freeing. In the end, you realize that God allowed that relationship not because He wanted you to suffer, but because He wanted you to wake up to your worth, to wake up to your calling, to wake up to His voice above every other. That pain became your alarm clock, and when you finally opened your eyes, you saw the truth. You never needed their approval to be loved. You only needed to remember who you were in God. The pain you endured through that narcissist was never wasted. It became the very soil where your purpose began to grow. Every tear you cried, every night you questioned your worth, every prayer that came out of desperation, God gathered it all and turned it into something powerful. You see, your pain became your platform. What once broke you now gives you strength. The story that once made you feel ashamed is now the story that carries healing for others. You didn't walk through that storm for nothing. You walked through it to carry wisdom that can guide others out of their darkness. In the beginning, you couldn't see it. All you felt was confusion and loss. You wondered why God allowed you to experience such manipulation and heartbreak. But what you didn't realize was that God was writing a testimony inside of you. The very pain that isolated you would one day become the bridge that connects you to others who are still trapped in the same struggle. Your scars became sacred, not because they disappeared, but because they started speaking life into someone else's pain. That is what God does. He takes what was meant for destruction and turns it into destiny. When the narcissist tried to silence you, they were unknowingly preparing you to find your voice. When they made you doubt your value, they were creating the stage for you to rediscover it. Everything they took, God restored, not just double, but with depth and divine insight. You learned how to comfort those who hurt, how to discern when love is not real, and how to see beyond the mask people wear. You learned empathy, patience, and power, the kind that doesn't come from books or sermons, but from surviving something that tried to break your soul. The beautiful part of pain is that it humbles you and softens your heart. It makes you see others differently. When someone tells you they're hurting, you understand them deeply because you've been there. You've felt that darkness. You've sat in that silence. And now you can speak with authenticity because you're not preaching from theory. You're speaking from transformation. That's what makes your story powerful. The narcissist thought they were breaking you, but they were building a testimony that hell itself couldn't silence. God doesn't choose perfect people to impact the world. He chooses the wounded ones who are willing to heal. Your pain gave you a message, your suffering gave you authority, and your healing gave you a ministry. You might not realize it yet, but there are people waiting to hear how you survived. There are souls praying for the same strength you carry now. Your freedom becomes a roadmap for their deliverance. That's how heaven multiplies pain, by turning it into purpose. So don't hide your story, don't bury your tears, and don't despise the past. What once embarrassed you will become the evidence of God's grace in your life. Every time you speak about what you've overcome, the enemy loses his power over you. Every time you share your journey, someone else finds hope. You've become a vessel of revelation, living proof that God can turn ashes into beauty, trauma into transformation, and pain into purpose. Your pain was never wasted. It was converted into power, power to help, to heal, to inspire, and to lead others toward freedom. The narcissist may have left scars, but those scars now shine as symbols of victory. You didn't just survive, you were anointed through the suffering. What once made you weep now makes you wise. And that is why your pain has become your platform, because through your story, others will finally believe that healing is possible. You didn't meet that narcissist by accident. It was a divine assignment. Every encounter, every heartbreak, every moment of confusion had purpose woven into it. God never wastes an experience, especially one that shakes your soul. That relationship, as painful as it was, became the ground where wisdom was born. What once felt like punishment has now become revelation. You came out of that storm with something far greater than you lost. You came out with wisdom. Wisdom that can only be gained by walking through the fire and surviving it with grace. At first, all you could see was pain. You wondered why God allowed such a toxic person into your life. You prayed for love, and instead, you found yourself trapped in manipulation. You gave your all, but it was never enough. The narcissist made you question your value, your faith, your strength. But what you didn't realize was that through every heartbreak, God was teaching you to see differently. He was sharpening your discernment, deepening your understanding, and opening your eyes to what real love and peace truly look like. What you once tolerated, you will never tolerate again, and that is wisdom. God knew that without this experience, you might continue to confuse attention with affection, control with care, and manipulation with love. So he allowed the wrong person to come close, not to destroy you, but to reveal what needed to change within you. That relationship exposed your spiritual blind spots. It showed you where you were still driven by fear, fear of rejection, fear of loneliness, fear of being unworthy. When you finally faced those fears, you began to see through God's perspective. You learned that your value doesn't depend on someone else's treatment. You learned that peace is not something you chase, it's something you protect. The wound that once made you cry became your greatest teacher. Every tear washed away illusions. Every disappointment stripped off another layer of pride, dependence, or naivety. Slowly, you began to understand that not every good-looking connection is God sent. You learned that discernment is not judgment. It's protection. That's wisdom birthed through pain. You stopped begging for love and started walking in self-respect. You stopped trying to change people and started trusting God's timing. You no longer see red flags as challenges. You see them as warnings. That's growth. And that's what the experience was meant to give you. When God said he would make all things work together for good, he meant even this. He took the manipulation, the heartbreak, the betrayal, and turned them into insight. You now recognize emotional patterns, spiritual traps, and signs of toxicity that once deceived you. You can spot false peace and counterfeit love from miles away. This wisdom becomes your shield, not only protecting your heart, but also preparing you to help others who are still walking through what you've overcome. And that's the beauty of divine wisdom. It's never just for you. It flows through you to others. The very pain that once isolated you now connects you to others who need light. You speak differently now. You love differently now. You pray differently now. The person who once questioned everything now walks in clarity. That's what God wanted. Not revenge, not regret, but revelation. So when you look back, don't see that relationship as a curse. See it as the classroom where God taught you the kind of wisdom no book could give. You now carry understanding born from experience, compassion born from pain, and authority born from survival. The narcissist was the catalyst, but God was the teacher. You were refined, not ruined. The wound became wisdom, and the pain became purpose. You met that narcissist by divine design, so that through what broke you, God could awaken the wise, discerning, an unshakable version of you that was hidden inside all along.